Well, let me start by wishing everyone a happy new year, and I hope you all have a great 2025. This year for me is going to be a new start as far as collecting goes. Towards the end of last year, I mentioned to a viewer in the comments that I pretty much got all the LPs that I was looking for. My collection is basically made up of American, UK, and Japanese records. Japanese because that's where I live, British because that's where I'm from, and American because they're the originals. You've got to get the originals, right? So really, I suppose from late last year, I started looking out for outtakes, getting as many outtakes as possible. And I did a couple of videos at the end of last year showing how you can get as much of the 1950s music as possible in as few releases as possible. And I also looked at the year 1960. In this year, we're going to be looking at 1961. 1961 was pretty much as busy as 1960 had been. There was one slight difference though. Elvis actually performed a few concerts that year, which of course would be the last ones he performed for many a year. In February 1961, he performed a couple of shows in his hometown of Memphis. These were charity shows, and I believe there's no audio available for either of those shows. Then the next month, on March the 25th, he performed in Hawaii, what's come to be known as the Hawaii Benefit Concert. And that one actually was recorded and eventually released many years later on a bootleg LP in, I believe, 1977. And it's been released a couple of times since. So I want to have a look at those different releases that have come out with that concert. This is the first one, the LP, on the Golden Archives label. And it's quite interesting how this LP came about. So the album is in a gatefold sleeve, and it's very similar to a Japanese gatefold design of the early 1970s in that it's not just a gatefold, it actually has like a little booklet stuck inside. And it has a lot of pictures and a lot of newspaper articles from the time. Now, these were all obtained by one of the two guys that produced this album, and he got in touch with the various Hawaiian newspapers that had covered this show back in 1961, and they supplied him with copies of the articles. And what he then did, he tried to get hold of the photographers as well. And in some cases, he actually managed to get copies of the original photographs. So it's a really well done LP. Show you what the inner sleeve looks like. This is the same as the front cover. This is based on an advertisement for the concert from the time. And then on the rear of the inner sleeve, you have other newspaper clippings that they couldn't fit on the inside of the gatefold cover. The LP itself is on the Golden Archives label, and this wasn't the first album they released on this label, but it was the first one to feature this new label design. It looks a bit cartoonish, but I appreciate the thought and the effort that went into it. It's very interesting, as I say, how this album came about, because the recording was actually done by a disc jockey who worked for a radio station that was promoting the concert. And what he did was he stuck a reel-to-reel recorder at the back of the stage and made a recording, and he handed out a few copies. Not very many people had a copy of this recording of this concert, and one of the bootleg guys, one of the two guys that made this LP, he met someone who had a copy of the tape of the concert, and initially he just kept it and played it for the other guy. They promised not to release it on bootleg. Then when Elvis died, the first bootlegger said to the guy with the tape, he said, "We should really get this released." And the guy who provided the tape, he said, "Okay, fair enough." So the first bootlegger went to see Joan Deary at RCA, and she knew, who he was. So he was given a pretty frosty reception at RCA. But anyway, Joan Deary listened to him, and she had an engineer listen to the cassette, to the tape. And engineer came back, whispered in her ear. And then Joan Deary said, thanks, but no thanks. And they didn't release it. So that's why it ended up coming out on bootleg. So the bootleggers actually approached RCA with an offer to let them release it, but they didn't. I wonder if that engineer who listened to that tape actually made his own little copy of it, because 3 years later, RCA actually did release it on the Elvis, Aaron Presley box set. And if you're wondering what that thing is there on the front, that's a hype sticker for the Japanese copy. The only difference between the American version and the Japanese version is that sticker. It's quite easy to find the set itself in Japan, but most of them don't have the shrink. So I reckon that quite a few of them were imported into Japan, but most of them no longer have the hype sticker. Without that hype sticker, it's just another American box set, right? And the concert appeared on the second disc. And there's Elvis. I guess he's got some kind of award there. Looks like a plaque or something. It's got his name on it. And USS Arizona Memorial it's got on there. And the songs are all the same as on the original album. And it even has all the audio problems that were present on the original album. There's all kinds of problems with it. It's distorted in places. There are dropouts here, there, and everywhere. But it's an absolutely fabulous concert. It's one of my favorite Elvis concerts of all time. And it's a shame. It's tantalizing to think what might have been had Elvis continued doing concerts in the 1960s. There are songs here which he never did, or very rarely did, again in concert. Things like Such a Night, I Need Your Love Tonight, and Swing Down Sweet Chariot. So it's a bit of a shame that he didn't do any more concerts after that until 1969. The other way you can get this recording, probably the best way to hear it, I think, is on the MRS release, Such a Night in Pearl Harbor. This is the first release of this CD. They've recently reissued it in a cheaper looking package, so it's possible to get it for a pretty good price now. This is the original version with the book on the inside of this hard cover. And this one's a little bit more difficult to find now. I'm not going to be able to go through the whole book, but it's got a 100-page book in there. There's the CD at the back. It's got the whole concert, but then it's also got this radio broadcast paid for by Colonel Parker, featuring several Elvis gospel tunes at the beginning. And the sound quality on this is much, much, much noticeably much better than on the other two. So if you are going to listen to this concert, and I certainly suggest you do if you've never heard it, it's fantastic despite the audio problems. This is definitely the way to hear it. Such a Night in Pearl Harbor. So there was Elvis, March 25th in Hawaii doing the concert. A couple of days later, he was filming the movie Blue Hawaii. And just prior to the concert, a few days before the concert, he spent 3 days in the studio recording the soundtrack for the movie Blue Hawaii. And about a week before that, he'd been in the studio recording a full album of material in one day. That was the material that would appear on the Something for Everybody album. Let's just take a moment to look at the music then. We're quite lucky in 1961 in that virtually everything has been released on the FTD Sessions box sets. So very quickly, the Something for Everybody material can be found on here with the Wild in the Country soundtrack, which was recorded the previous year. And it's got the I Feel So Bad takes on there. I think you only did 2 takes of that. Blue Hawaii Sessions as well, that's been released. I'm sure many of you got the big book with these CDs, but this is the separate release of the Sessions, 4 CDs. Again, all takes of all songs are on there, finished and incomplete. Speaking of movies, in March 1961, same month, March 1961, Parker was actually trying to negotiate a part for Elvis, well, the lead role in a Hank Williams biopic. That didn't work out, but fortunately the movie was made, and it was called Your Cheating Heart. And that turned out to be a bit of good fortune for me many, many years later, because as some of you will know, when I published this book here a year or so ago now, there was a single included in it, which included the song Your Cheating Heart on one side. And you see the text there at the top, Itsuwari no Kokoro. That's Your Cheating Heart in Japanese. So I was wondering, where am I going to get some text? Where am I going to get some really good stylized text for the title? And I found out that the movie had been released in Japan. So I found a poster, Your Cheating Heart, the Hank Williams movie. I found a poster, and here it is. Same size as, oh, you can't see it today. Same size as the posters that I've got behind me. So you see the big red letters there? That's Your Cheating Heart, Itsuwari no Kokoro. So what I did, I scanned that, sent the scan over to my my pal Dick in Germany, and he changed the color to green and put it on the artwork for the single. So that was a piece of good fortune. Moving forward to June 1961, and in June, Elvis had a quick recording session to produce a single, His Latest Flame and Little Sister. 3 other songs were also recorded that night. And those songs can be found on another sessions box set, the Pot Luck Sessions. This also contains a lot of material which was recorded the next year in 1962. And going forward to July, Elvis recorded another soundtrack, this time for the Follow That Dream movie. You can find most of that music, most but not all, on FTD's single CD here, the 7-inch classic album series, although it was released only as an EP, of course, back in 1962. So this one has the original versions of each song, plus plenty of outtakes. You can get all of the outtakes on 2 or 3 bootlegs. I think there are bootlegs called the Follow That Dream Session, and another one called What a Wonderful Life. There might even be more than that. The missing music from this, the takes that FTD didn't include, they're all basically false starts. I don't think there are any complete takes which are missing from the FTD CD. So my guess is that they just included what they included just to make it a more enjoyable listening experience, because the missing music it's only about 8 minutes worth of music, and it could fit on there, but they chose not to put it on there. However, this one does have the classic On Top of Old Smoky, which I don't believe is on the bootleg CDs. I think it's on a few old bootleg LPs though. And then finally in October 1961, Elvis was in the studio a couple of times. The first time was another singles session, which produced the Good Luck Charm, Anything That's Part of You single, plus a few other songs. And they can all be found on the Potluck Sessions that we just looked at a moment ago. And then at the end of October 1961, Elvis recorded the soundtrack for the Kid Galahad movie. And that soundtrack, all takes from all songs, can be found on this really excellent 2-CD Kid Galahad Sessions CD set. This is one of the first ones when they were still using the tape box design for the packaging. I can understand why they stopped doing that, to be honest. So that was Elvis's recorded output for 1961. We're pretty lucky in that we can get virtually every note he sang in the studio on official releases. And if you really want those 7-8 minutes of missing Follow That Dream soundtrack music, you can get those on a bootleg CD or 2 as well. Any questions or comments, as ever, please feel free to drop them in the comments section below. But I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Cheers.